host. I am Yori Folarin. Our subject matter this morning, of course, is going to be the tragedy, the military, the army drone, that unfortunately, dropped a bomb in an, well, it wasn't an unintended area, but it certainly turned out to be unintended casualties of the army drone that was dropped. We'll talk about that today. The army has apologized. The nation is in mourning. I guess in terms of how did it happen, again, the army has said that it was a misread of information that the ground troops had sent up and all of that. But we have a couple of security experts to look at the issue and talk around these kind of scenarios generally. Let me introduce Dr. Tony Ofoyetan. Dr. Ofoyetan is a legal practitioner, Director General, International Institute of Professional Security. A fine morning to you, Doctor.
Good morning, Uncle Yori. Good morning, Nigeria.
Thank you for making time available for us. And we also have Dr. Kabir Adamu. Dr. Adamu is the Managing Director of Beacon Consulting Limited. That's an enterprise security, risk management, and intelligence firm. We shall, be talking with him as well. A fine morning to you as well, Dr. Adamu.
Thank you so much, Uncle Yori, and I'm delighted to be here once again.
Thank you very much, sir. Let me start in studio with Dr. Tony Ofoyetan. This is a tragedy because it's, I guess, if it were to be between, no, that's not where they use friendly fire. But so that's not where if it were to be an army unintentionally hitting its own troops,
friends, allies,
then it would be friendly fire. So this isn't friendly fire. This was a mistake, to put it delicately, not to talk of a cock-up, but anywhere from between 80 to 85 casualties, innocent civilians have become the casualty of this. How does this kind of a thing happen often? Does it go as, well, that's what it is in war. Sometimes mistakes like this happen.
Well, Uncle Yori, I understand why you are struggling, because we are actually also struggling to really analyze the situation and make sense out of it, while condoling with the families that lost their beloved ones, and also commiserating with Mr. President, because I know recently he uttered a statement which shows that he's really interested in making sure that things like this don't happen again. Having said so, I think it's not the first, it's not the second. Precisely, I think as at last year or so, statistically we are told that we have about 300 Nigerian civilians that have died as a result of, air mishap that were not intended from 2014 all through 2017. If you remember 2017, you remember the IDP bombing that claimed lives of more than 100 civilians and the like. You also remember the one that happened in Kaduna too. The fish farm, you also remember the one that happened in the fish farm too. You will see that all these are similar signatures, and coincidentally, many of them happened on a Sunday. That's even one of the coincidences that I think they should also look at. Yes, most of them happened on a Sunday. So now, having said so, you see, one of the things I brought out from this is the purchase of intelligence, of technology, must be backed up with requisite understanding of that technology. Before you purchase technology, understand it very well and understand the use of that technology. You must first of all be a master, because you are talking of a drone attack and all those stuff like that. Now, in a situation like that, who are those that actually manned these vehicles for the purpose of this attack? It is a lazy man's argument or excuse to say, we made mistake in killing people. It doesn't happen in other climes. It doesn't happen.
That's why I asked.
It doesn't happen in other
usual,
clients. Yeah, it's already more or less like a reoccurring
becoming a problem.
And why it is also reoccurring is because no heads has been lost. Now, in a situation like this, now the military formation have come out to apologize and all those stuff like that. What happened next after the apology? Now, another thing we also look at inward.
We've heard about the Chief of Army Staff said he was there, one, to commiserate, but also to be on ground, all of it with a view to ensuring that this kind of thing never happens again.
One of the things I think we should also understand is the military's professional training has to do with ground operations. Air Force has the specialty in area surveillance, area operations, and area bombardment and the like. It is in Nigeria you will see, every military, security agencies and organization having a department of everything.
I see what you're saying.
Of everything.
Well,
and at the end of the day, it impedes on specialization.
Okay, I hear you. But again, it's not so unusual because we hear of other countries where, for instance, to liken it to our case here, the Army will have its pilots, will have trained pilots and specialization.
I am not in doubt of that.
Warfare.
Yes, I am not in doubt of that. Yes. But you see, in a situation like this, where you now have a recurring decimal of things that are similar.
We need to interrogate.
We need to interrogate. Now, you need to now look at the security formation. Do you have sleeper cells among them? Why do you have this type of thing reoccurring and it's always in the civilian, against the civilians? Now, we've not had this type of kill among the terrorists themselves.
Indeed.
Even though we know that there have been successes that military had recorded over the years against the terrorists, but one major casualty against civilian is too big. Then you are talking of it now becoming avalanche.
Indeed. Let me ask Dr. Kabir to also weigh in on this matter. A number of points have been brought up by Tony there. Indeed, a lot of people, first of all, look towards the Air Force. Say, Air Force, what have you done? And the initial reports that came out was the Air Force said that we were not conducting any operations, and then it was later to come out when the Army owned up and said that actually it was one of its pilots. And so the question of specialization comes through. Look, the ground forces were said to have been sending up information, but we hear that the coordinates were mistaken, and this is what led to where we have. So I would have thought that the whole purpose of having ground forces that can send up coordinates to the Air Force is up there, not the Air Force, but its own Army air, support up there. How can you make it make sense that coordinates were wrong, mistakes were made, upwards of 80 civilians, innocent civilians, were bombed? How does that? How can you make it make sense for us to sort of understand the dynamics of what could have gone on?
Thank you, Uncle Yori, and just to align with your and that of Tony, you can't make sense of this senseless killing. We're not talking of one collateral damage. We're talking of, at the last count, depending on which figure you want to go with, the state emergency management agency mentioned 85 persons. My own sources on ground mentioned about 126. So we're looking at between that 85 and 100 plus persons that have died. So you really can't make sense of that. However, there are facts that have emerged. And in this instance, at the center of all of this is intelligence. Most times, the capability of a military force in the airspace is determined by capabilities that are also on ground, especially, and I want to emphasize this point, we're talking of an asymmetric warfare where the bad elements mingle together with the good elements. In most instances, actually use the good people, the good elements as cover specifically for the purpose of reducing this type of air attacks against them. And so the need for prudence, the need for being circumspect in taking actions and measures that would result in mass casualties should be the number one guiding principle of the deployment of such assets. So when, for instance, the feedback we're getting is that there were some error in the misinterpretation of the coordinates that was sent, I don't want to think that the Army should give us that. If it was the Air Force, then perhaps one would even look at that as a possible issue. But the Army is a ground domineering force, as it were. Their 40 is actually on the ground. Now, speaking in technical terms of intelligence specifically, when you have assets on ground that can give you coordinates, it is expected that whatever they are using, and again, I use the word assets on ground, because in collecting intelligence, you would have assets on ground, you will have air assets for surveillance capabilities. Now, if the coordinates were generated by the assets that were airborne, then that type of mistakes can happen. But when you say the assets, especially for an army that is ground-based, it is ground-based asset that produce that coordinate, the chances of error are extremely slim. So I would most likely look at other possibilities and not necessarily errors in coordinates from assets on ground. But if the error was from assets that were flying, then I would say there is a failure of intelligence in the sense that we concentrated on just one component of the intelligence and not necessarily the other components. Mm-hmm. The other area that perhaps is not the remit of this conversation is open source intelligence. I'm a private player, I'm not a government player. I use open source intelligence, and I can tell you that what you can harvest from open source is enough to prevent what happened in Kaduna. In other words, we need to, in details, interrogate how we're collecting and how we're using that intelligence. Mm. I know maybe in the course of the conversation, we'll look at the inquiry that has been, promised by the president and probably by other arms of the government, so we can discuss all of this.
Indeed. Thank you initially, Dr. Adamu. First of all, it wasn't the Air Force, so we've come away from that, where most people would have expected that this kind of a thing, the Air Force is the first person you think was probably in operation. They said, no, it's not us. Now, among them, you spoke about every department wanting to have some aspect of the other department and maybe some unhealthy competition, but one has to be careful how one phrases this thing because one doesn't want to add salt into a wound, to the injury. But reporters have gone in and interviewed the survivors, and we've heard that when the first hit was made and people came out, young men came out to find out what's going on, then there was another strike. And as Dr. Adamu was saying, this whole business about the intelligence and, shall we say, the accuracy of it and sending it up, I wonder how fast the reaction time is. And this goes back to what you said at the very, very beginning, that people need to be expert of delicate equipment like this, and if you're not ready, then you're not ready. To be deploying, God forbid, we have more of this kind of a scenario. Now, Tony, there's a difference between the Air Force, for example, or even if it is the Army. If an Army plane or an Air Force plane bombing and a drone attack, because they've combined two things now. They're telling us that the Army, if I understood it properly, was up there in the air, and that also this was a drone attack. A drone is an unmanned...
It's an unmanned air vehicle.
Exactly. Yeah. So can we sort of clear that up? The Army wasn't necessarily up there, but they were controlling...
Very well.
That's what you think, that they were controlling drones from...
I think so. From my own study of the story, anyway, yes. What I deduced was it was a drone attack. And of course, like you have said, it's an unmanned aerial vehicle, which could do a lot of things. That is why you see that the aviation industry is actually in charge of regulating anything that has to do with drone. That's why they are very strict about even you possessing certain types of drone, because it has avalanche of capabilities, and they are so big and so enormous. It can
and this must be specialized zone
very well.
Drones.
Yes, specialized. Even the Tucano we are talking about, Tucano jets to a very large extent, is more of the same, because these are vehicles that has such capability to operate with minimal human involvement, especially directly. So when you are talking about such things like drone, you are talking about somebody at the rear.
Yes.
Controlling and before you do that, like Dr. Kabiru said, in terms of coordinate, it's a little bit difficult to believe that such could be, but we don't want to join issues
for now, since they're going to be investigating it, they've
with the military and all those. But I think they should now look inward and understand one thing, and that is one thing I still want to emphasize: professionalism in those that are handling all this equipment. Before you purchase any equipment, no matter how sophisticated or good, make sure that those that will man it are first of all trained, retrained, trained and retrained.
Which one would have taken for granted, Tony? I mean, what you're saying now, it must be international best practices.
We've had too many of the same thing. It's not just in, see, Uncle Yori, it's not just in this area. Now, go to the ministry, you will see sophisticated photocopy machine that costs millions of naira hanging somewhere. The secretary does not know how to operate that machine.
Yeah.
Somebody brought the machine because they told him it's the latest.
It's the latest
and he approved it, maybe because they also want to make money out of it. Approved it, brought it in, nobody to operate it. Some of these things are also brought in and they are licensed. Every year you have to now be renewing the software license. They renew it the first year, they are tired of renewing it, they dump it. So they say these are big lessons. And for other agencies, look, when Mr. President came on board, I remember the first thing he did when after appointing the NSA was to call all the security heads and told them he wanted a symbiotic relationship among them. Now, if that is the mandate of the president, why would Army conduct an air operation without the knowledge of the principal person that is supposed to be in charge of area operation?
Now, Dr. Adamu, what do you say to that? Because, again, that is the logic that most ordinary Nigerians would follow. Yes, we hear that the Army can have planes, the Army can have pilots, but when it comes to this kind of, any kind of warfare, the first person you think of being the specialist there is the Air Force. So do you care to sort of hazard a guess as to why the Army was in charge without the Air Force being involved? And then maybe you'd like to also weigh in on this whole matter about, were these unmanned vehicles, these drones, were they sent up from the ground? Or I was thinking that you could have a plane up there and you could still send drones from that plane to go do what you need to do. That whole area, I was a bit confused about it.
Okay, so first off, drones or unmanned aerial vehicles are force multipliers in modern day warfare. Especially where you are dealing with an capability and a military capability that is challenged with so many shortages, such as manpower, the area of coverage, and several other considerations that makes drones or manned aerial vehicles force multipliers. And so, apart from just the armed forces of Nigeria, several other law enforcement agencies have, drones that have offensive capabilities. I mean, at time, and I hope this doesn't happen, but I hope one day you don't invite Tony and I to discuss the police usage of drones on civilian populations, because the police do have drones that have, offensive capabilities. Even though I do not think as at now that they've deployed those drones, but we know they've procured them in the last few years. The procurement of drones in modern day warfare is almost taken for granted that it's something that each component of the security sector should have. It does help them. However, what happens is that there are rules of engagement. There are procedures that you put in place to limit the likely collateral damage. And in my opening remarks, I emphasized the point around the type of threat element that Nigeria is facing. It's an asymmetric kind of threat element. It's not your conventional warfare where you have the enemy on one side and then you have your forces on the other side, and so you can deploy and you are sure of limited consequences or collateral damage. In this instance, it's an asymmetric warfare. So when you go to procure assets, did you have at the back of your mind that this is the type of threat elements that you are dealing with? And so when you are deploying that particular asset, this is what you are likely to encounter. And I make bold to say, Uncle Yori, I'm not hazarding a guess now, I'm making bold to say that we need to look inward and consider developing a framework for the acquisition of these assets that are commensurate with the type of threat elements that we have. There was a jamboree of acquisition over the last few years, and I'm with all sense of responsibility, I'm extremely worried that I'm seeing the same pattern almost repeating itself at the moment. The supplementary budget that was passed, security had the largest share. The current 2024 budget that is being considered by the parliament, security has the largest share. And everything around that is based on our acquisition. Now, what framework, what strategic guideline is guiding the acquisition of whatever assets that is proposed within the budget? And I make bold to say that we do not have that. And that is it shouldn't be. We're in 2024 or about to enter 2024. We should have a strategic plan for whatever we're doing. We do have a national security strategy. We do have a national defense policy, and embedded in those two documents are certain guidelines that should allow us to say, okay, these are the threat elements that we have, and these are the assets that we need. Now, where we are, several security MDAs have procured drones within the country. What is guiding the usage of those drones? That is another area that conversation needs to be had. Are there rules of engagement? Are there operational procedures? I do not think there's enough of that. So with the second part of your question regarding how drones are being deployed, most instances there is a base for these drones. So something like that looks like, maybe call it an airport, but it's called a drone base, where those drones are located. And then, of course, the moment you need to use them, you deploy them from those bases.
Okay.
Now, because each drone has a flight capacity, the number of hours it can stay airborne, and all of that, the sighting of those bases is also dependent, for instance, on where the threat element is located and how you intend to use them.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Adam. Tony, again, all of this really, it's going to come down ultimately. It's a tragedy, yes, but it's going to come when they begin to analyze it to try to find out what happens with a view to making sure it never happens again. It's all about a failure of intelligence. And we've heard that the army actually had observed movements of the terrorists, of the bad guys, the robbers or whatever, the proposed target. They had actually determined that there was activity by them in the area. But then, I don't know, they had pulled out. So it brings me to the thought, the question of, are they not able to keep apace with the changing dynamics on the ground? Is the software or the communication not as fluid as that? So that what I noticed 2-3 minutes ago, can't I just say that hold it, abort? It's not like that anymore. They've moved. So, to put it in a very crude layman's way.
I understand you. Let me start by saying that intelligence is time-bound. And intelligence that is not used as at when it ought to be used would have been like a corrupted flash, that virus has entered.
Or like an old newspaper.
Or like, thank you. Well, at times, if you have not read an old newspaper,
it can still be valuable.
So,
but you just won't be cutting edge.
Yes. So we must understand something. I keep saying this, you have the sleeper cell. What the sleeper cell does is that they penetrate every adversary organization, especially the terrorists, basically to get information.
When you say sleeper cells, that's having our men embedded with the bad guys secretly, so that they don't know that these are men.
Or people that are sympathetic to the cause of the adversary.
Okay, and are able to give internal information.
Yes. So that is why you see things like ambushment succeeding and all those stuff like that. Either because you have a mole, sleeper cell, people that are sympathetic to the cause of the adversary. Because if you talk about the fact that, let us assume and concede to the fact that there was intelligence that these people moved to X and Z location. And as a result of that, there was that bombardment, the necessity of that bombardment. Now, what is the time frame between when you got that information and when you launched the attack? Now, the time frame becomes very instructive because you are talking of people that are moving. You remember Dr. Kabiru said something about asymmetric warfare. Now, human shield are actually the protective vehicle of these people, the terrorists. Now, if they are not in the rural forest, the real forest, and they have to now relocate into the people, that means that your ground force and your area force must work coordinately at the same time always. That means that your communication system must not be breached. In other words, it must not be tampered with. Yeah, it must not have been tapped.
Ground force and area force, in this case, the ground force and the area force was one and the same.
Well,
we're talking about the army.
Yes, that's unfortunate. However, they can even be the same. But the issue is, were they working together in terms of timing?
The different departments.
Yes, in terms of timing as at the time of that operation. Because at times, you see, I give it to the military because at times, because of the principle of need to know in intelligence, you may not inform everybody. Yes, it may just be those that are in that operation at that time that needs to understand the modus operandi of that operation as at that time.
Yeah, I hear you.
So because of that, there may be limited information. But the information, the question is, how secured is the information? What is the timing of the dissemination of the information? Did you cross-check in terms of intelligence? Intelligence is in process.
Okay.
When you have processed it, you also have to look at it and be sure, because as it is now, we are crucifying intelligence. And intelligence may be saying, I'm not guilty.
We're not even the one crucifying it. Even the military themselves said that, the intelligence was faulty. So, that is to say, a mistake was made. But let's take a quick break. Okay, welcome back. And we're looking at the tragedy, quite frankly. Don't know what else to call it. It's an accident that happened where the armies, we're talking about, security assets now were actually deployed against our own. Talking about Tudun Biri, where anywhere from, over 80 to around 120, depending on what account you are hearing, were killed. And clearly there was a failure of intelligence, and we've been looking at that. It's unfortunate, but you can see, well, I don't know if you can see, but Tony Ofoyetan, Dr. Ofoyetan, lawyer, Director General, International Institute of Professional Security, is my guest in studio. And remotely, we have Dr. Kabir Adamu. Dr. Adamu is Managing Director of Beacon Consulting Limited. Now, there you go. Dr. Adamu is remote. So I imagine that in this operation, the military was remote. But here you are. I needed to talk with Dr. Adamu, and I got Dr. Adamu on there. What's happening if remotely I say, okay, it's Dr. Adamu, and then I find that it is somebody else, a totally different unintended target that is on there. So that leads me to the question, Dr. Adamu, of comment. Tony has already commented on it, but comment on this whole matter about the time lapse between when information is received, for instance, the information that, yep, there are the terrorists there, and when, for instance, there aren't the terrorists there anymore. Is it something you can, as it were, turn on a sixpence, as they used to say back in the day, that you can turn and sort of abort what would have become a calamity? Because it is also known, and it is also said, even I think in the Middle East and Hamas and all of this, it is said that some people are alleged to be mixing themselves up with the civilian population as a kind of shield, knowing that the military is going to be reluctant to strike at where they feel there can be what do you call it, civilian damage. So what's going on in there as far as you can decipher, pending when investigation is concluded and we begin to get some results? What's going on where the military has information, you order a strike, and it's too late to unorder or to cancel or to abort? What's going on there in the timeline?
It's never too late to call off a strike that intelligence reveals, the target is not the intended target. In this instance, there has been several instances, I think, and Tony mentioned it at some point, where such collateral damages have occurred. And so it would have been expected that by now there will be several levels of checks that the relevant security department would put in place. So in this instance, as an example, even after deploying the drone, and then of course the communication between the strategic headquarters, as it were, and then the operational command, as well as the field command, would be as such to ask those relevant questions. I'm thinking best international practice. I know in the Nigerian context there will be deficiencies, but what is expected is that there are intelligence assets on ground. Tony gave an example of what intelligence assets on ground could do. This is a public space, so I'm mindful what I say. And then of course there will be intelligence assets with other capabilities. Now you have to establish a fusion between the information coming from both the ground sources and then the other sources. And then once you identify the target, the next thing you ask is, can you take out that target with limited collateral damage? And that collateral damage could even be the target's family. So there maybe his wife and his kids are around him. You now ask your question, is the target that important that you want to eliminate him together with his wife and kids? And if the answer is one that the command center cannot answer, they refer back to the operational command center. And then, of course, it goes up the chain like that until a decision is taken to say, okay, we do understand that this is the target, it's been established, these are the likely collateral damages, but we believe that the relevance of taking out this target supersedes so those are the kind of considerations.
Yes, and I think it's only fair to say that the tension must be tremendous because you're in an operational situation. So effectively, you're in the middle of a crisis, and as you were explaining it to us, the step by step, all of this would have to be happening in seconds, I imagine, nanoseconds. But Mr. George in Ikeja, thank you for calling in. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Uncle Yori, and I greet the two doctors of security that you are talking to. Uncle Yori, what happened, is very, very unfortunate because lives were concerned, and nobody would be happy to see something like that happening, because we all know what it means to lose somebody in that manner. But Uncle Yori, I am a bit disturbed at the reactions of some of us Nigerians, especially in the media. The army made a mistake, obviously a mistake. I don't want to believe that it just deliberately used drones to kill fellow Nigerians. Obviously, it's a mistake. It does happen from time to time. Even the U.S., that has the most sophisticated military in the world, they do make such mistakes. They made such mistakes in Afghanistan. They made such mistakes in Iran and hit their own military men on ground by mistake. We are not looking at it as if it is mistake. The way and manner I'm seeing some reactions could demoralize our military men. I saw the body language of the Chief of Army Staff yesterday when he visited the scene. He was looking demoralized. That's what I could see. And if anybody wants to see or know the importance of security personnel, let us withdraw the military, the Air Force, the police, and all the intelligence agencies for 48 hours. They will not work.
Okay.
And criminals will overrun this country within that 48 hours.
Sure.
Then you can know they are important. So when they make mistakes, we should, amid the pain, we should also understand them. I saw somebody on channel television, yesterday. He was ranting and virtually condemning every military in this country. All the service chiefs should be retired and they should be tried just for making a mistake.
Yeah.
Another elders forum in the north says the former Chief Justice of Nigeria should be brought to come and investigate and kill all of them. All these are extreme comments.
Yeah, indeed. I hear what you're saying. Thank you very much for calling in, George. But the tough questions still need to be asked. And there are statements that those of us that are not really going to be involved in the investigation of it can sort of say, you can't fall, such as has been made by you and Dr. Adamo, that one needs to be sure of the utmost capability of all those who are going to be involved in the use of such equipment, such assets. You guys have been using the code security assets. Well, yeah, that is what it is. It's like, look, it has to be as precise, I would imagine, as precise as that of a neurosurgeon. That kind of precision. You can't afford for it to be any less. Now, can we say that such a level of precision is what obtains in these fields that we are addressing now, that we're talking about now? I guess those are the kind of things that will be brought out in the investigation. As for the Chief of Army Staff, looking, well, he would have been looking, I'm not too sure about demoralized, but he's the same as us. He's a Nigerian. And the Nigerian lives have been lost. So there's no way he could have been as sprightly as you would have expected him to be. But going back to this whole question, because I think it has been called out again, the utmost level of training, it's not, look, when it comes to all these technical things, I have my issues sometimes with us, my fellow countrymen. Look at the, what is it now? The electricity supply
Okay.
they said it's a small thing, go online, go and do it. Nigerians will phone in and tell you that it's not been able to be done. It's not been able to be done.
It's not just electricity alone.
And so many things.
Many government parastatals that will ask you to go online.
And do it.
There is always a consultant you have to revert back
so
to.
it's not working. And so that's why, but you see, all of those, pata, I won't get my passport. Pata, I won't get my meter, realigned or whatever it is. But not where a life could be lost. Nay, 85 to 120 lives could be lost. We want to be very, very sure. It has to be as precise as a neurosurgeon working, is my own layman sort of
I think,
contribution.
Uncle Yori,
Sorry, sir, let me quickly bring in Mr. Joshua, who has also called in from Irewolide. Good morning to you, Mr. Joshua.
Good morning to you, sir, and good morning to your guest.
Yes.
I was almost declining my call because George said what I wanted to say. But I just want to add my voice to it in this way, Uncle Yori. My condolences to the lives lost. These are people like us, and it's so sad that it happened. Uncle Yori, in the course of this terrorist attack in the north, I've lost about 5 soldiers, friends, right? 2 brothers of my relatives, and 3 friends. This terrorism going on in the north is a huge problem, Uncle Yori, that needs not to be politicized. I want to say that military do make mistakes. I don't know any machine, anything, any precision that anyone can talk about that will say people don't make mistakes.
No, that's not what's been said. I hear you, sir, and that's not what's being said. But the point was made that the frequency of it in recent times has begun to be alarming.
I do understand the matter of frequency and all that, and it's about upgrading training. But what I would like to add to it, Uncle Yori, is this tone of ethnicity.
Okay.
Maybe somebody is trying to be funny, or religion. They should take all that out of it, Uncle Yori.
Of course.
Let's speak to the issues.
Of course, I don't think anybody would even pay attention.
We need to be more careful.
Yeah.
Of course, those are important.
Yeah, they are.
But the military should continually be encouraged.
Indeed.
That's just my word, Uncle Yori.
Thank you very much for calling in, with that point. Yep. You were going, I had to, come in just before you went in there. Again, Tony's words are well taken. That we have to be careful in how we comment, because at the end of the day...
Yes, I agree. You see, what both callers said is not far from the truth. And what we at the level of the studio here is saying is to help them and also give them some level of lead. Because in the regimented work, you see, even the subordinate may know better than you, but the subordinate will keep quiet. And allow you to do it the way you want to do it, even if you are erring. But for those of us that are outside, the bosses, they can take clue from what we say and the advice. It's not a criticism at all.
No, I don't even think so.
And why this thing is also coming to the front burner as we speak today is because you said it. Between 2014 and 2017, we have more than 300 people. Between 2017 and today, we have more than 200 that have died as a result of this mistake, in quote. Now, the truth is that you don't keep making the same mistake. You have to go inward, because people will react.
It's going back
it's
to...
Not, it has nothing to do with whether we are pretending.
As Mr. Joshua just said, it goes back to training and retraining. And you had also mentioned this before.
It's as simple as that.
Training and retraining.
We salute, in short, I personally, spirit, soul, and body salute the military formation.
Indeed.
When we are sleeping, they are in the bush and in the forest. So there are a lot of things they are doing to make sure that we sleep peacefully.
Yes.
And we just have to encourage them.
Let me take on Prince. Prince is calling in from Kaduna. Good morning to you, sir.
A very good morning to you, Uncle Yori.
Thank you for calling in.
And I have this text for your guests as well.
Yes, thank you.
Two of your contributors have already said one or two things, but I just want to add mine into it.
Sure.
What I discovered really is that sometimes when there are mistakes, we as Nigerians go to the extreme to demonstrate our anger on the mistakes. For example, now, all the lives that were lost, even a single one, is very, very essential and important to us as Nigeria, because we that are talking to, we have our lives to lead. And those that left, they had their lives, they have their aspirations, their ambitions in life. But these people that are struggling to see to our safety, they are doing that thing at their own life, with their blood, with their lives as well. How many of our soldiers had gone into this challenge? And we can say that is their work, good, but the challenge here is that if there is a mistake, all we need to do is to encourage them. Had it been that the report has been that so-so date, the bandits, so-so numbers were hacked down, we all clap for them. But the situation now is that there is a missed target. And therefore, don't let us add to their wounds. They too are wounded, because they cannot easily think that they should do this. But it has come. I can see, I read the chief of army staff yesterday by the graveside, getting emotional. And you can see with uniform on him, it's not easy. But all these our analysts, all these our experts, they will just go and then give a serious condemnation. If this flat condemnation is given and they refuse to act next time, then we shall all suffer for it. Please, Let us help them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prince, for calling in. Indeed, your words well taken, and I don't think any analyst of ours, will, condemn outrightly like that. But we still need to interrogate the matters. The president himself, the army themselves have said they're going to be conducting investigations into all of this to be sure that it doesn't happen. And so we've been talking that if a mistake was made, it is only God that is perfect now that will not make a mistake. But our analysts this morning, for example, on this studio, they have pointed to the fact that, look, it's all about expertise and, upgrading that expertise by training and retraining. And we all see that nobody wants this mistake to happen, least of all the army. And and these are our heroes. These guys in uniform, they are our heroes. We support them unconditionally, as a matter of fact, let it be said. And so we expect nothing but the best out of them. I mean, if Nigeria had a rocket program, you would expect only the best of the best to be in the charge of those rocket programs. Nobody wants a ship to go up and then explode before our very eyes. So that is the kind of thing that is being alluded to, that has been spoken about by both Dr. Adamu and Dr. Ofoyetan here, that it goes back to training and retraining. But the point is well taken that I don't think anybody's going to pay any attention whatsoever to any joker that is bringing in ethnicity or religion or anything like that into this. None of that is going to fly, and I don't think anybody's taking any of that seriously. But Dr. Adamu, to quickly come back to you, I suppose the point about continuing efforts to make sure that training and retraining brings these kind of mistakes down to the barest minimum must certainly be the objective of the country.
Yes, that, and then additionally, improving standards. The military has a standards unit, so that standard unit needs to come in and look at the deployment of these assets.
Exactly.
I don't want to leave this point. We're facing an asymmetrical threat. That threat is within us. So when we're deploying assets that have the capability for mass casualty, we must make sure that we have taken steps to reduce that mass casualty, and it is that standard department. Now, the failure to do that, and that's what Tony has mentioned today, there has been a consistent failure to do that. That means the National Assembly, the Parliament, and perhaps even the judicial arm of government needs to come in and now look into the military operations and strengthen those standards so that civilians are protected. Now, why is this important? And I want to address the three callers specifically. We are saying this because you cannot win a counterinsurgency operations or an anti-banditry operations if you do not win the hearts and minds of the people. And the only way you can win the hearts and minds of the people is if you demonstrate to them that you are not willingly killing them. And sadly, we need to demonstrate that through accountability. I hear them. I hear you when you say the Chief of Army Staff face showed remorse. But what would even be more convincing to the people is for him to show accountability. Who was responsible for that mistake and what has been done to that person? That is what he needs to address.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much. In fact, time is fast running out now. But the important thing here is the patriotism of Nigerians and the support that they have for all our men and women in uniform. They are saying that, look, this has happened. They are looking at commentators. We are not just talking about commentary here. We're talking about expertise and, giving you gentlemen giving us an insight into how it shall go. The military itself has its own standards. I'm sure that they're going to be investigating this. It's not a cliche, with a view to ensuring this kind of thing doesn't happen again. We are all used to an air crash happens and all sorts of investigators come around from all over the place to analyze that accident, how it happened, where something went wrong. I imagine that the army is going to, I don't know if it's just the army, our military is going to be investigating that as well, without prejudice to the fact that Tony has said that it's not the first or the second time in recent memory. And this is where, I suppose this is where we're going to have to leave it. It's our hearts go out to all those Nigerians who lost their lives. There's a sense in which it doesn't diminish our support for the military, but the needful still has to be done, right?
We all support the military, I must say. And I think that should be my own parting statement, as it were. Nobody in Nigeria, I think the military has the highest patronage from Nigerians compared to other security agencies. I must tell you that.
Indeed.
We love them,
yes.
and that's just the truth. You see
Across
the emblem you are bearing. You see the emblem I'm bearing.
Yeah, here we are. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the Armed Forces Remembrance.
Yes,
so
yes.
we hold them in very, very high esteem.
Extremely high
esteem.
Yes, because like one of the callers said, you know, they more or less like give their life to secure our lives.
For which we appreciate their
eternally,
sacrifices.
Yes.
But we've got to leave it here now. So let me just thank Dr. Kabir Adamu. Thank you very much, Dr. Adamu, for coming on the program this morning. And thanks to Dr. Tony Ofoyetan in studio as well. That's our program today. Please join us tomorrow for a fresh edition